Ralf Müller is a very well-known software architecture expert, author, and ISQB accredited trainer. Ralf started the open source project Doc Toolchain, which deals with the effective documentation of software architecture. He's also responsible for creating the various formats of the ARC42 template. Yeah, and enjoy now his session on using AI in software design.
Thank you, Mirko, for the introduction, so I can skip my first slide. Hello and welcome to my talk using AI in software design, how ChatGPT can help with creating a solution architecture. Let's skip this slide because you already know everything about me. And time is precious today because I have lots of slides. But first up, a disclaimer. Be aware of the dangers when you use ChatGPT. Keep data protection in mind, both in regards of personal data and company information. Copyright might be an issue when you work with ChatGPT if we drop files which are not public available. And I will show you how to solve the ISQB advanced exam with ChatGPT, but don't do this with a real exam. You are not allowed to do so. Now, another disclaimer. I am not an AI expert. I am only a prompt engineer. I'm a user of ChatGPT, and I think I gathered quite some experience by now. So I will show you today my tips and tricks. Most of the time when people talk about ChatGPT and other large language models, they say it's a stochastic parrot because there's a neural network at the core of the system, and it just, does some kind of auto-completion, like when you type in text on your mobile phone based on probabilities. That's the core of the large language model. But I believe it is more the all-knowing monkey. And why I think so, I will now first try to tell you and introduce some basics about ChatGPT. So if you compare the freely available ChatGPT 3 with the not free available ChatGPT 4, you will notice that there's a huge difference. ChatGPT 4 has been trained on lots of data, terabytes of text data. By the way, most of the information I present here, I Googled on the internet, but there's not much reliable data out there, but it gives you some rough estimates. So much more data in the training and many more parameters which are needed to give good answers. So GPT-3 is available for free. So many people who talk about ChatGPT and who have checked it out are talking about the free model because you have to pay $20 per month to use the GPT-4 model, at least if you use the ChatGPT-4 by OpenAI. And if you search deeper for comparisons, here's, for instance, a study about a medical exam with roughly 1,000 questions. And here you see the difference between those two models. GPT 3.5 scores 65% of the test. Humans on average 75%. GPT-4 82%. So it has really a different quality, the GPT-4 model, than the GPT-3 model. And it is more than just a neural network. But it's hard to find details about it. It's based on the transformer model architecture, and you find this picture on the internet. And yes, we are architects and we should be able to read this diagram, but for me, it's not so, doesn't give me so much meaning, so much background as I expected. So for this talk, I came up with my own diagram, and it's, partly guesses, it's quite abstract, but you will notice what I want to tell you. At the core, there's a neural network, and you input text to the model, and before this text hits the neural network, we already have a natural language processor. So it's not only the neural network at the core, but there's something in front of it. And then when we output data, there's an output processor, and then we get our text output. And there's also, the system also feeds context to the NLP processor. We will talk in a minute about the context. And it seems to be not only one neural network at its core, but a mixture of experts. So in the past, when you asked a question, a mathematical question, what's 1 + 1? It went through the normal neural network, and it had some problems with bigger numbers or more complex calculations. Now at the core seems to be this mixture of experts. So something decides to which expert model the question should be routed. And so it gained much more knowledge and can lead to better answers. But it also now is a multimodal tool, because it not only works on text, but you can now also drop images, which are then processed and fed to the NLP processor. And even you can ask it to output images through DALL-E 3 and voice. You can speak to it, and it can generate speech. So you can not only type in your questions, but you can just work with it with your voice. There's a code interpreter, which is capable of using Python scripts to work on your prompt. And there are many more plugins available, which makes the model quite powerful. So you see, it's not only just a neural network at the core, it's many more of it. And there was one article where they stated that ChatGPT 4 has around 110 layers. Whatever this means, I think it's not the layer of the neural network, it's the layers before and after it. But as I said, I'm not the AI expert, I'm the prompt engineer. So let's talk about context. When you chat with the system, you type in your text, and first should be some kind of priming. You should give the system some context, who you are, what you know, and what you are gonna do. In this example, hey, let's work on a web-based application with Spring Boot and MySQL. And then you chat with the system, and everything which is here in the chat, in the history, will be part of the context of the system, will be fed to the neural network. This is quite important, because if you continue your chat, there's a window of context, and now some messages has left this context will not be fed anymore to the model. And this means that your first statements, the priming, leaves the context and the system doesn't know anymore what we are talking about. And it will start to give wrong answers. So how important is this fact? ChatGPT-3 has a context of 2000 tokens. GPT-4 has a context, in the past of 32,000 tokens. Since roughly 4 weeks, they managed to increase the context to 128,000 tokens. A token is not a word, it's a part of a word. So those 32,000 tokens are roughly 20,000 words. So it takes some time to get out of this context, but it depends on the model you work with. And for each model, there are different models with different context sizes. So the context size of 128K is only available through the API at the moment. So here's my first tip to see whether you are still in context or not. Just start every session with this prompt, which tells the system to start every response with a greater sign. Because it outputs its text with Markdown formatted, the greater sign will be outputted as a quote, which will look like this. So the first paragraph of each output will be this dash as long as we are in context. The first time we leave the context, it will forget about this prompt and will also not display this quote anymore. But I wanted to tell you that the system is not just a probability machine, not the stochastical parrot. And for this, embeddings are quite important. You want to extend the networks, the neural network, with your own data, but that's not possible because it's already fully trained and you can't easily train it with additional data. The solution for this is to use text and create vectors from these text fragments. There are some algorithms which create those vectors which just check out the words and see how near they are to each other. Quite complex. I don't want to get into detail here, but you have to know about those embeddings, that they are different than what the model knows within the neural network. And it's also not, how it belongs to the context. Because those text fragments, those vectors are stored in a vector database. And when you talk to the system, it always, for each prompt, might query the vector database, check out whether there is a text fragment which fits your prompt, and pull it into your context. So if it does this, your context will be smaller than what you chat with the system. So that's why it's important to know about it. And even if you have a big context, it's always a question how much context you really have. Again, GPT-4, 32,000 tokens. And we will see when we are in the chat model, the chat GPT, we will have less. We will have something about 4,000 or 8,000 tokens. So going back to the all-knowing monkey or the stochastical parrot, I believe with this approach, those multiple layers, multimodal approach, and those embeddings, the system behaves like, yeah, the all-knowing monkey which has access to all the knowledge of the world, at least the knowledge which is available to it. But let's get started with the real details, with the with trying to get a solution for the advanced certification of the ISAQB. So as I already said, we have to prepare the model. We have to do some priming. Every session, every chat session starts from scratch. The model doesn't know what you chatted with it before in another session. So you have to tell it the context of your discussion. It doesn't know you. You have to tell it what it should know about you. You have to tell it what's the goal of the session and maybe also what the solution should look like. So for instance, my context is that I'm an experienced software architect in the field of web development. My favorite programming language is Java or Groovy, JavaScript, and corresponding frameworks are not my thing. I prefer to get by with minimal JavaScript. Okay, that's me. Interesting, I wanted to create an image for this, and here you see some kind of bias. And it's so funny that not even I am depicted as an old man. It's also that there's a really old technology calculator on the table. So I gave it a try and see what kind of bias it uses when I tell it my favorite programming language is Python and JavaScript. That's cool. And I love modern JavaScript frameworks. Hey, now I'm young and cool and hip. So bias is a problem even where you don't expect it. But let's move on with the priming. I should not only tell the system, yeah, this small paragraph. I also extended it to tell it more about how I work, which frameworks I like to use. By the way, there's lots of text on those slides. You don't have to read it. You will get the slides later. So this is really enough context for the model to understand how I think, how I work, what my profession is. It isn't long ago that you had to copy and paste such a priming every time into your chat session, which was not fun at all. But now ChatGPT has custom instructions, and you have two text fields where you can put in what would you like ChatGPT to know about you to provide better responses. So that is the text from the last slide, and I call this long-term memory because I can put in there something which ChatGPT should memorize. And the second part of the custom instruction is how would you like ChatGPT to respond? And there I also have lots of prompts. For instance, start every response with a greater sign. We already had this, but also many things. For instance, be excellent at reasoning. Don't mention your knowledge cutoff. I already know this, and that really helps. And I also instructed that I want to create ASCII-Doc output for my documents and even how I want to have my ASCII-Doc output formatted. Okay, even more priming. I want to have the best basis for my chat session with ChatGPT. So I tell it, today I want to talk with you about a software architecture certification. Do you know the ISAQB? Every time I start a session and talk with ChatGPT, I ask the model whether it knows about the technologies or other abstract things I want to talk about it. So it first answers yes, it knows it, then it describes the ISAQB, and this tells me that it knows what it's talking about, and it also creates some context. For instance, here I ask about the advanced level certification, and it repeats the key aspects of the certification, adding this to the context and helping both ChatGPT and me for this session. By the way, I think the answer was much longer, but that isn't too important for this session. Now we are still at the priming mode. So there are some public available PDFs for the exam, and I just dropped in here the official rules. The model should know about the rules. I also dropped the glossary because I'm not a native speaker of the English language. And when we talk, ChatGPT and me, about the exam, we should use the same wording. And so I think it's important that it knows about this document. And as you can see, those documents are now put into the system as embeddings. And that should be enough for the priming at a moment. Now we can start with a real task. We have a third PDF document, the example task Big Spender for the advanced certification. I asked ChatGPT to read the document carefully, but not start to solve the task yet. Why? Every time you drop something into ChatGPT, it tries to come up with a good answer. And here it would try to, already solve the certification task. But this would clutter up the context. So even with this, it just tells me something about the document, that it understood it, and ask me if I have any questions. Feel free to ask. Great. The PDF contains 2 images, and I already experienced that somehow images in PDFs are hard to read for ChatGPT. But if I just drop them into the chat and tell him, hey, here are my images from the PDF, it really manages to read and understand those diagrams. It can read the text in the boxes, it will notice the connections and output what it sees there, which is quite helpful. 6 months ago, when I submitted the idea for this talk, ChatGPT wasn't capable of doing all of this. And I wasn't sure whether I can create a solution with ChatGPT for it. It couldn't read those images. But what was quite interesting, there was a description underneath this class diagram in form of a table. And I did it the other way around. I put in the description and asked ChatGPT to create a diagram. And the diagram didn't look like this one. And I was looking for the reason and found out that the description didn't fit the diagram in all parts, which is also quite interesting. One last instruction. I learned that ChatGPT is capable of asking me questions. So before you solve a task, check if you have any questions regarding the task and ask me those questions. I pressed return and oops. Yeah, it already had some questions. It came up with a list of 10 questions about the task. And I think, quite good questions like regulatory requirements. It doesn't know that I'm from Germany, and maybe one regulatory requirement is data protection law and other German laws. So this was quite interesting, and I answered all those questions, and you can answer them one by one, and every time you submit one, it will tell you, okay, now I understand, but please answer also the other questions. So you can turn sides. But the first subtask, quality attributes. I always let ChatGPT repeat the objective for the subtask. And it repeats it, adds to the context, and I see that it really knows about the subtask. Great. So this worked. This is the subtask, the objective. Now we can go on. Derive the quality scenarios, create me an ASCII-Doc document. Okay, and wow, I got a table, quite nice. I scanned it and looks reasonable. The importance, we could work on this. It shouldn't be everything high, but quite a good example. Now we also want to have a utility tree. I asked ChatGPT to create one in PlantUML. And as you can see here, this says 3 of 3. So when I work with those prompts, I refine them. And it doesn't make sense because of the limited context to refine the prompt in the next prompt. It makes sense to edit your prompt to keep the context short. And here you can see I had 3 tries. And first, I just had the idea to output it as a PlantUML mind map. But then I noticed it didn't came up with the IDs of the quality scenarios. So I refined this, and wow, it tells me it created a file which can be downloaded. I wasn't aware that it can do so, but it worked. It was not a hallucination. So I downloaded this file, displayed it in PlantUML, and here you go. We have a utility tree. We have the quality attributes. Everything's fine. Now you can see, yeah, that's a third step for the subtask. Again, a table, and it's a special table because I again refined my prompt because first it had some problems with the motivation, and I then asked the system to put the motivation below those lines with a call span of 3, and it knows how to work with ASCII-Doc tables, and came up with a good result. The result is a little bit questionable. I would have post other weights on it. So system reliable and availability only 10%. Yeah, okay. I think it should be more. But these are all things you can discuss with the model, and so change its mind. So as you have seen, I let the model create parts of the response just to work on the details, because it has a limited output space, and it will not output the whole solution for this one task if you do not work iteration by iteration on it. And so I then asked it to give a solution for the whole subtask. And here we are, it repeats the other things it already created and looks good to me. Solution strategy, that was an easy one. But I had a problem with repeating the objective. You can see I refined the prompt as stated in the document was important, because If I do not say as stated in the document, it just tries to get it from the context. If I say as stated in the document, it starts to read the document again and outputs what it finds in the document. And this seems to be quite okay. It's a nearly word by word repetition of the objective from the document. So with this, I just told it, hey, give me a solution strategy. And yeah. And again, I told it, if you have any questions about this task, ask them now. And again, I was surprised. It came up with some questions. And it doesn't work as expected that when I, at the start, tell it, whenever you have questions, ask the questions. You always have to repeat this thing. But it came up with those questions. I answered those questions, told it to give me a solution strategy. And it came up as expected with the key constraints, assumptions, and basic principles. Talking about the chat context, I can ask it how much of the context is left. And it tells me 2,470 tokens of 4,000 available tokens. So we are still in context. Great. I repeat it and it tells me 2,300 tokens. Okay, that's an estimate of 8,000 tokens. So it doesn't know whether it has 4,000 or 8,000 tokens, but we are still in context, I believe, because what happened here? We don't have the quote anymore here in front of it, but that is just because it sometimes forgets to output it. Here it is again. Again, objective for the third statement, for the third subtask. This time it forgot something, overview of purchased and open source parts. Okay, so in my prompts, in the next prompt, I tell it that it forgot it. But first, I wanted to have the context diagram. I thought this is an easy task. I told it to create it as Plant2ML in the C4 notation, but what I got was too simple, far too simple. It didn't remember what it needed for this context diagram. So this is worthless. Give the model time to think is a prompting approach where you let the model first generate the information it needs. So first name all actors who will interact with the system, name all external systems, and create a table with the external interfaces. And now we get an answer, and with this answer, we just repeat our task, our prompt from just 2 prompts ago, and the result is quite better. And now I'm happy with the actors and the external systems. Let's go on with business models. We need a business structure. And ChatGPT can generate it. Again, we have a Plant2ML diagram as download. And again, I'm not happy with this diagram. And again, I did some prompt engineering and told it, the system, to display all external components from the subtask 3 in the diagram, actors and external systems, and that changed the display, the generated diagram. The 5th subtask wants to have a technology stack. Again, let's repeat the objective, and hey, that is not the whole objective, because if you take a look at the document, Subtask 5 is a long subtask, and the problem seems to be that it goes over a page break. This is a problem for ChatGPT. And in this case, I fix it by putting all the text in the context. When working with those embeddings, it just fetches for each answer those embeddings it needs. Now I put it in the context and grow my context. And with this full context, I can get a technology stack. I'm happy with this. And it was also requested to explain the technology stack with a workflow through the system. And yeah, it tells me the system parts involved for each step and the contribution to the quality goals. Looks fine for me. Let's check the context again. Tells me we used up 4,600 tokens out of 8,000 tokens. Okay, let's go forward. The final subtask, evaluation. And in this case, I extended my prompt to repeat the full objective. So you have to be quite detailed and concise with your prompts. And then I got the full objective, fine. And this time I ask whether it understands the objective and whether it has questions regarding it. And I was surprised. It says, yes, I understand the objective. And I don't have any specific questions. Okay. So go ahead, identify the top 5 riskiest and most important quality scenarios. Here they are. Fine. And then I asked to create the whole document. And as you can see, data integrity, it has a rationale essential for legal compliance. Great. Architectural decision, implementing strict access control. Good. Trade-offs, this may slightly increase system complexity, but is necessary. I think those results are quite good. And now we finished the exam. And the question is, how much context is now left? And now it tells me we used up 5,000 tokens out of 4,000 tokens, and the earliest parts of the conversation are no longer in the immediate context. We just used up all the context. So I guess when you do it in a real scenario, you will start the context from fresh for each subtask. And I guess it's also just a matter of time that we get a ChatGPT with a really huge context, and then these problems will be gone. Conclusion. ChatGPT is a generative pre-trained transformer. That's what GPT is about. And it is capable of transforming the advanced exam input to a solution output. I think that's quite great. As I said 6 months ago, I think that wouldn't be such a good solution. But now, with the advancements in the model, I think the solution is quite okay. It has some problems, but it is a good starting point. It's a architectural buddy co-pilot for me, and I now can work from this solution on and make it better. It needs guidance. The results have to be checked. Yes, it's quite helpful. Cannot walk alone. That's what I mean. It's a buddy to help me to get good ideas, to make good decisions, and to, for instance, get different views on the architecture. Interesting. If you ask ChatGPT to analyze the results and ask it to find errors and inconsistencies, it will find the shortcomings by its own. So this is also quite helpful to just ask the system whether the things it produced are good or not. Now, the advanced exam consists of two parts: the homework, which we just did with ChatGPT, and an oral exam, where you have to show up and answer some questions. And will ChatGPT be able to pass the oral exam? The technology for this is already there. You can create virtual avatars, you can speak to the system, and you can even fake video. So the technology is there. But I think that it will be, you will notice that the solution was not created by a human architect. And so you still have to analyze the solution, understand it, and be prepared for the oral exam. To say it with the words of William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. So when you think of GPT-3, the free model, and GPT-4, where you have to pay $20, that's not evenly distributed. Not everybody has access to the better models, but it's already a very interesting technology. So thank you for your attention. The slides are available behind this QR code. There's also a discussion board there, and the full transcript and the solution as PDF. Thank you for your attention. I think we still have 3 minutes left for questions.
Thank you, Ralf. This was an amazing talk and about a very important topic. I have two questions for you. The first would be, how long did it take you to solve the problem? How many attempts were needed?
It was quite fast. I would say 2 days to work with the system and to rework some of the prompts. But I also have to say that I only did a quick view over the results. They look from a first view quite good, but you will find problems with it.
Okay, thank you. Then another question. Are there other means of creating embeddings other than priming interactivity by dropping documents in the ChatGPT?
So when you just work with ChatGPT, I think this is a main way to do embeddings. You can also by now state some URLs, which it then goes and fetches them. And if you create your own systems through the API, you can use the API to create embeddings to, for instance, use a larger set of PDFs, create your own vector database, and thus create those embeddings. You then have the full control of it, and because you always you create the chat, you put in the context to the API, and you decide how much of the context you will fill with the embeddings.
Thank you. Here's another question. Did ChatGPT really help you, or did you try to make ChatGPT understand insights you already had beforehand? Did it surprise you with good ideas you did not have before?
Yes, it always surprises me with good ideas and always helps me. For instance, it was closer to the objectives of the task than I was. And that was something where I thought, yes, it's right. These were the expected results. I would have written much more just to tell how I came to those results. But that's one thing I was surprised of. Another thing, that it asked me questions about the task, and if you take a look at those questions, they make sense. And this also helps me to get a better understanding of the task. And the next thing is when you work on architectural decision records with ChatGPT, you can ask it for several options how to solve the problem, and it might find options you didn't think of. So yes, it helps. It helps to extend your mind.
Okay, and now last question, because the time is running for the break. What is your view on the IP used in the training sets, and in whether your input or questions were then added as training for the model?
So most of the time when I work with ChatGPT, I asked very general questions about open source software. So that's something I do not consider as a problem. When you work with an exam, I could only work with a public available example. You're not allowed to do this with a real exam. And also, I wouldn't put in some internal documents or something like this, or personal data. But the interesting point is that all those companies who provide those large language models, if you buy the enterprise edition, they promise you that they don't use the data you put into the chat for trainings or something like this. So I think there will be, yeah, a switch in how you think about this problem and how it will be solved.
Okay, thank you. There is one thing. Someone is asking for the QR code. Maybe you can bring it up again, the QR code. But I think it was in your presentation.
Yes.
You can download the presentations to the attendees. You can download all presentations later. We will provide it for you. Yeah. So I think, or maybe
I think
Ralf,
I will
you.
also put the link in the chat.
Okay, this is great. Okay, thank you.